What if a nightmare could follow you out of your sleep? I don't mean as a fuzzy memory that vanishes with the morning light. I mean as cold, hard, physical proof, carved right into your own skin. We've all had those dreams that feel incredibly real, right? The sensation of falling that jolts you awake, or a phantom pain that fades the second you open your eyes. But what happens when you wake up, and the injury from your dream is still there? Bleeding, bruised, and just real. This is a story about that terrifying possibility. It's about the line between your mind and your reality, not just getting blurred, but being completely shattered. And it all starts with a young man named Rohan, and a trip back to his family's old home. Rohan was a city guy, born and raised. His life in Mumbai was a predictable world of concrete, computer code, and logic. He always thought of superstition and folklore as charming stories his grandmother would tell, entertaining, but not something you'd actually believe. So when his family asked him to visit their old ancestral village in rural Uttar Pradesh to handle some repairs on the empty house, he agreed, mostly just to get it over with. The house was ancient, built by his great-grandfather, and you could feel its age in every creaking floorboard. There was this faint, musty smell of old monsoons that seemed permanently baked into the walls. The village itself felt like it was stuck in another time. Electricity was a maybe, and when the sun went down, the world just shrank to these little golden pockets of light from kerosene lamps. The nights here were darker, quieter, but also filled with all these sounds he wasn't used to. The whole atmosphere was just thick with history, a place where the old beliefs still mattered. For Rohan, it was just a rustic inconvenience he had to put up with for a little while. He had no idea it was about to become the setting for the most terrifying and unexplainable moment of his entire life. The first couple of nights were fine. He'd deal with contractors during the day and read by lamplight in the evenings. But on the third night, the dream came. It didn't start out as a nightmare. In the dream, he was in the village, but it felt older, more primal. Everything was hyper-realistic. He could feel the grit of the dirt path under his feet, the sticky, oppressive humidity on his skin. He found himself drawn towards some kind of commotion happening at the edge of the village. A small crowd was gathered around a hut, their faces lit up by torches, a mix of fear and morbid curiosity in their eyes. Inside that hut, a woman was screaming, and it wasn't a normal scream. It was this horrifying mix of deep, guttural growls and high-pitched shrieks, almost like two voices were coming out of one throat. Dream Rohan pushed through the crowd to see what was happening. He saw a young woman thrashing on the floor, her body twisting in ways that just looked wrong. Her eyes were wide open, but they stared right through people, as if she was seeing something else entirely. He heard the villagers whisper a word he'd heard before, but never really understood. Chadail, a vengeful spirit, a possession. Then, suddenly, the woman's head snapped in his direction. Her eyes locked right onto his, and this chilling smile spread across her face. In a blink, she was on her feet, moving with this terrifying, unnatural speed. She lunged at him, not like a person, but like an animal. He stumbled backward, trying to fight her off, his mind screaming at him, "This is just a dream. Wake up, wake up." But the fear was real. It was suffocating. She tackled him to the ground. Her strength was unbelievable. And then he felt a searing, sharp pain in his left forearm as her teeth sank into his flesh. This wasn't some vague, fuzzy dream pain. This was real. Agonizing. He cried out. And the shock of it, the sheer reality of that bite, finally ripped him out of the dream. Rohan shot bolt upright in bed, gasping for air, his heart trying to hammer its way out of his chest. The absolute darkness and silence of his room was a shocking contrast to the chaos of the nightmare. He was drenched in sweat. He could almost still smell the smoke and dirt from the dream. "Just a dream," he muttered, his own voice trembling. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, trying to catch his breath, even laughing a little at how deeply the village atmosphere had gotten into his head. He got up to get a glass of water, his arm throbbing with a dull ache. He figured it was just the memory of the dream, the power of suggestion. It was only when he flicked on the dim bathroom light to splash some water on his face that he saw it. There, on his left forearm, in the exact spot where the woman had bitten him, was a mark. And it wasn't a rash or a random scratch. It was a clear, distinct, horrifyingly perfect ring of teeth marks, pressed deep into his skin. The center was already turning a dark purple, and the edges were dotted with tiny red breaks in the skin. It was, without a shadow of a doubt, a human bite mark. Panic crashed over him. He tore his room apart, looking for... what? Someone else? Impossible. He'd locked the doors himself. Could he have done it? He twisted his body, trying to see if he could even reach that part of his arm with his mouth. No way. Not with that angle. Not with that kind of force. The bite was vicious. It was deep. He just stared at his own terrified face in the mirror. As the impossible, terrifying truth began to sink in, the nightmare had followed him out. It had left a mark. By morning, the bite mark looked even worse, the bruising darker and angrier. Rohan's logical 21st century mind was desperate for an explanation. He went online, searching for things like waking up with unexplained marks. Science offered a few possibilities. Things like parasomnia sleep disorders, where you can unknowingly hurt yourself. Maybe he'd thrashed around and hit his arm on something. Or maybe, however unlikely it seemed, he really had bitten himself. There were even some rare skin conditions that could look like bite marks. These were the rational answers, but they all felt so hollow. The mark was too perfect. It was an exact match to that visceral, terrifying moment in his dream. There was nothing in his room that could have made that specific pattern. And the more he tried, the more he knew the self-inflicted theory was physically impossible. Science gave him plausible deniability, but it didn't give him any comfort. It couldn't explain the feeling of someone else being there, the memory of the teeth, the pure intent he felt behind the attack. This war in his head, his rational mind versus his terrifying experience, pushed him to look for answers in a much older place. Because here, in his ancestral village, stories of spirits leaving their mark on the physical world weren't just stories. They were treated as a fact of life. He had woken up with evidence that broke his understanding of reality, and he was in the one place on Earth where people wouldn't immediately think he was crazy. Driven by a fear that logic couldn't touch, Rohan went to find the village elder, an old man who had even known his grandfather. He showed the man his arm and, feeling foolish but desperate, told him about the nightmare. The elder didn't look surprised. He just looked sad and knowing. He started to tell Rohan about the folklore of the region, and for the first time, Rohan listened not as a skeptic, but as someone desperately searching for an answer. The elder spoke of entities like the Chudailafen, the vengeful ghost of a woman who died tragically. He said these spirits are believed to be filled with so much rage that they desperately try to interact with the world of the living. Possession wasn't seen as some mental illness, but as a spiritual attack, marked by inhuman sounds, unnatural strength, and violent outbursts. Everything Rohan saw in his dream. And then the elder said something crucial. He said that powerful spirits, or ones with a strong enough reason, could actually manifest their energy physically. They could push you, scratch you, and in some rare, terrifying stories leave marks on your body. This idea isn't just in this one village. All across India, from tales of shapeshifters in Kerala to possession stories in Malashpur, the belief that the supernatural can physically harm you is woven deep into the culture. In some traditions, a mark like his is even called a witch's mark, a physical brand left by something not of this world. These weren't just scary stories anymore. They were a framework for understanding something that had no other explanation. For Rohan, listening to these tales, the woman in his dream started to feel less like a ghost and more like a case study. Then, the elder told Rohan something that made his blood run cold. The small hut from his dream? It wasn't just a random creation of his subconscious. A hut, just like it had once stood right at the edge of the village, on a piece of land that was now empty. Decades ago, a young woman lived there. After her husband and child died tragically, she was consumed by grief, and the village ostracized her. People started hearing terrible screams coming from her home at night. They claimed she spoke in voices that weren't hers and would fly into violent rages. Fearing she was possessed, the villagers left her completely alone. The story ended in tragedy, with the woman dying alone in the hut, under circumstances no one ever really cleared up. After she died, the hut was considered cursed. It was eventually torn down, and the ground was ritually cleansed to, as they said, close the chapter. Rohan had dreamed of a real place, and a real person. A woman whose tragic story was a perfect match for the folklore of the Chudailafen. Stories like Rohan's really make you question the boundaries of still the reaffirmed piece of physical evidence, a reminder of the nightmare that clawed its way into his reality. Sure, science offers logical possibilities seldom fully embraced during parasomnia. Maybe it's a diagnostic condition. For Rohan, those explanations will never be enough. They can't erase the memory of death or impossible or the searing pain of repeating his arm. He's left stuck between two worlds. The modern world of science and logic he used to live in, and an ancient world of spirits and belief he now doesn't exist. The story doesn't give us a neat answer. Instead, it leaves us with a the world around us. And what happens when something on the other side decides to reach through and bite back?